Lynn Sawyer. Peggy Lawson. Jessica Stewart. Jessica Bass. Carrie Hayes. Here, not voting. Roger Stamon. Present. Jennifer Vanilla. Here, voting. Gary Berg.
Here, voting.
Tom Reeves. Darcy Throckmorton.
Here voting.
And Aaron Brown. Tammy Tripler.
Here. We can't vote remotely, right?
No, since you're talking to the speaker, I'm guessing
But I'm here.
All right, and then so Richard Davis, Marissa Rosinski, Emmy Sawyer, Lindsay Staples, Amy Palmer, Carrie Alley, Darlene Sumner, Krista Shuey, Rachel Bishop. Okay. Hi. A voucher. I've seen a lot of vouchers. I don't know if I've seen a voucher from us, but I guess that would go around to that piece line. And then a approval of the minutes for the September 10th, 2020 meeting. Did you say so?
No. Yeah.
Thank you. Is someone taking minutes?
We'll be taking minutes from the recording. Yes.
Okay. All right.
You might want to just step off here, have a so you're not so close.
Oh, this one?
I think that would be better.
Away from the computer. Thank you.
Yeah, Tammy Willis messaged me today that she was in attendance at the meeting and her name was left off the minute. She also emailed Selena.
Thank you.
Thank you. Speak with me.
So Tammy Willis needs to be added to the minutes here as an added. Yes. Thank you. Any other comments, questions? It's not much higher than the arms though.
No, but at least we think you
Right. Hearing none, those in favor of the minutes with the one change, aye. Those opposed, nay. Thank you. All right. I'm going to turn it over to public comment. Yeah, see, yeah, I just made that. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to public comment. I don't know everybody with masks on, so if you have a comment, could you stand up, say your name, you can even say the town you're from, and then speak loudly. So I'm opening for public comment.
My name is Christy Seed, and I have 2 children at Mount Desert Elementary School. And I'm here just to question the reversal on the testing of teachers, asymptomatic teachers. It news to me that that's not going to be done, and I did see the email from Superintendent Grouse just a few minutes before I got into the meeting, talking about the positivity numbers. And as a parent, I found that testing was a big decision, a big part of our decision to have our children return to school. And the fact that it's been changed, it makes me a little bit more concerned. And with our positivity numbers, we were testing Bar Harbor employees all summer long. We were also testing Jackson Lab employees. So I'm questioning why we're not going to continue with that. And that's for each.
Okay, thank you. And just so you know, if public comment is planned for us to hear, we don't have dialogue back. I do know there's a number of the topics that will be for.
Brian Henkel, and I live in Mount Desert. I have a daughter going to the elementary school there, and I have similar questions to Christie's. I assumed that there would be a substantial testing program, that there would be work done beyond the 200 tests that have been acquired earlier through partnerships, and that we would be putting together a reserve of tests to have testing of asymptomatic staff members. I feel it's important that you do that, that it's necessary component of keeping everybody within the community safe. I don't think it should be linked the way that it was with the positivity rate on the island, or if it's going to be linked to something, there needs to be some metric that's measured. There needs to be a number, not just substantial. It needs to be more detailed than that so that everybody understands where the testing would start. But I do think that testing needs to happen even without positivity rates within the community. It's been done in Bar Harbor, as Christy mentioned. Essentially, with testing the staff on a regular basis, you're breaking the kids up into pods when they're going back, and it's important to us to have this as well for us to send our kids back. If you're, in essence, in a way, testing those pods by testing that staff member that's with them all the time, and understanding when you do have positive test results that you can then trace and isolate that group, understand where you have in the community. Because even if we don't have the disease, it's not that it's going to get here. It is going to be here. It's going to happen. And we need to have testing in place in order to detect it so that we can move as quickly as we can to ensure everyone's safe.
Thank you, Ron. Other public comment? All right. Seeing none, then I will turn it over to the superintendent for superintendent report.
Thank you, Heather. And as referenced earlier, there's some questions about testing, so we remain open to working with our partners, which includes the Down East COVID-19 Task Force, NBI Hospital, and the Jackson Laboratory. The communication I put out this afternoon to both parents and staff was done in concert with input from both the hospital and the Jackson Lab, our nurses, and our administrative team. We certainly are committed to a testing program, but we also have to be realistic to what our present resources are. We applied for use of Corona relief funds, and we were denied that. So that is a significant gap that we have to address, and we'll continue to try to work through that through grants and other resources. But that's also another piece, but not the singular piece. The advice we have to our physicians at the hospital and the recommendations we have in order to not proceed with asymptomatic testing was based upon that data, that local data. But we stand ready if we have the resources in place to commit to an asymptomatic testing program. And I'll continue to meet with those folks as I do weekly, which includes the hospital representatives, the JACs, as well as the Down East COVID-19 task force, and provide information as that becomes available. But that's what I have at this time regarding asymptomatic testing. In addition, I continue to conduct visitations to each school as invited by each principal. And I would remind local boards and board chairs, information specific to each building's opening and progress. As I said before, it's not a competition. Each building principal contacts me when they're ready to review the checklist that has been vetted through their building-based teams, which includes their custodians, their nurses, and others. The timelines vary. As the board previously heard in the community, we presently have Frenchboro, Swans, and Cranberry Island schools that are offering remote as well as in-person hybrid. Today, I visited Mount Desert Elementary School, visited with Laura and on Sergeant, and they've been given green light to move ahead or proceed with the timeline Laura has recommended. In addition, I visited Trenton Consolidated School with Jandria and Bob Williams, and they've also been Tremont Consolidated. Sorry. They've also been given the green light to move forward. And this is based upon the facility checklist they provide and submit to me. So we have that documentation on record. I've also reviewed information from Principal Malhini at the high school. So he'll begin reintroducing students to in-person hybrid. And I have yet to do a visitation yet at Connors Emerson, but I know we're getting close with Barb and her team, as well as Mike Sabori out in Trenton and Pennatic Elementary in Southwest. So pleased to take any questions specific to our process or timeline. But I remind folks that specific building-based questions really should go back to principals regarding the timelines and any logistical questions. Anything from the board on that topic?
I have just one,
Please.
sorry, Heidi Awesome Tree. I have just one quick question about, and I don't think it's a single building, it's more like a district-wide about the busing situation. With the schedule of the high, is the high school still doing half day? And then, so they're gonna split up their buses, right? And the kid, how is that logistically gonna work with the kids, the younger kids, the high school, and the kids in the buses between groups?
Ian, do you want to try to tackle that one, or do you want me to take a stab at it?
I can.
Thank you.
So we're moving our start date at the high school is gonna be at 9 a.m. That'll allow the elementary students to stay in their scheduled start times. The pickup time doesn't change for the elementary school. Will change for the high school. So after the elementary kids drop off, and the high school kids will be picked up. And we are dismissing at around 11:05. Those kids will be taken home, and then students will be picked up. And then we will dismiss at our normal time. In past years, 2:13 to 15. The bus will be on here approximately 2:20. Rock Heights gets off in around 32. So the in-between cleaning will be just high contact surfaces rolling. Our thorough cleaning will be done at the end of the day.
Thank you, I wasn't sure, I hadn't heard.
In addition, Heidi,
Thank you.
in addition, what we've done with our principals is if they don't feel they have adequate resources in place, they have access to local cleaning companies or contracting to provide or augment additional services. Again, if there's any, yes.
You mentioned back in August that you were going to have some reviews of the air exchange
Yep.
and those systems. Any update on that?
Yes, so each individual principal or a head custodian or maintenance person, we've invited in, and here's an issue that we're not all with the same company across the AOS. Different schools are using different vendors, so it could be mechanical services, one vendor or another. Each of those individuals has been into the buildings and worked to make sure that those systems are operating efficiently at maximum capacity, so the information has been provided to each principal and each head custodian. In addition, we had industrial hygienists work with those folks to make sure that if there were any questions or gaps, that he could liaise and bring resources to head custodians or principals. So that has been done in each of those roles.
And then the high school.
High school, I know mechanical services was in there with Butch.
Summer to work with Brady and his staff on, make sure the systems were clean and it would be opened up to full capacity. We also had the industrial hygienists come in, do an initial assessment, and see that our ventilation is good, especially in the fall, when windows open and so on. And we'll be doing a final report of the remark, is that correct?
Yes.
That's more pertinent to when the polling wants to go.
In addition, Roger, it's a good question. We don't see this as a one-shot deal. We'll be continuing to do a regular review, bringing people back to the table, especially as the weather changes, things get colder. That includes changing out filters, making sure those systems are operating regularly. So having a regular rotation, and we're in communication with those companies, whether it be Siemens or mechanical services, those different vendors. And again, this is just a footnote, probably a good opportunity for us to be looking about making sure that we're all on the same page with our vendors. It's a lot more efficient to communicate with the same entities.
Okay.
Sorry.
Tammy, you were raising your hand?
I just for a while there, we were getting a lot of feedback, but I keep hearing, and it's not any of us. It doesn't appear to
Hang
be
on 1 second, can't hear you.
it doesn't appear to be any of us on the screen, but I keep hearing typing, and it's hard to hear over whoever's typing, and it doesn't appear to be any of us board members. So I don't know where we're picking it up from I don't know if anyone else can hear it besides me. But
Okay.
yeah, we all do. We hear someone typing, so I don't know if it's picking up whoever's taking me.
Thank you, Tammy. I think we're set now.
Okay, thank you.
Do you care if I touch this, Josh?
What's that?
Do you care if I touch the computer?
You can just
Can I continue?
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
So one thing that's become apparent to us is that all the schools are doing the very best they can to gear up, but our schools are in different places. We've got resources, facilities, and one of the things that's becoming apparent is where we have those gaps. And we're committed to taking a step back and assessing where we're at once we have all of our kids back in our buildings to make sure that we do some community outreach, checking with parents, checking with staff, and make sure that we find where those gaps are to do a leveling. Very honestly, it's not the same as it was a year ago in September. I know you know that, but it's very difficult to make sure that all of those buildings are on the same page. And we recognize that we do have to take a step back and do a reassessment. With that, we also recognize that when we built this calendar among our schools, we built it pre-COVID. And we also know that we've come to you with some recommendations. We've lost some instructional days. But we believe it's time for us to take a step back as an administrative team, do some consultation with our associations, and reevaluate the priorities of our calendar to ensure teaching and learning continues to be our primary focus. And we look at professional development and all those pieces. So I will be prepared through the administrative team and work with the associations when we have our October meeting to bring some recommendations, should those groups feel we need to make some adjustments. I say that because there's an incredible opportunity. I'm aware that some folks have raised the issue of October with that professional development day. Based upon the recommendations from the administrative team, we believe it's important to keep that professional development day in place. There are parent-teacher conferences that are scheduled. In addition, there's some training that we want to provide for our staff, COVID-related, and some other pieces that we believe are timely. Anti-racism opportunities, training, and related pieces. So I did want to put out to the board that we were looking at the calendar. We are aware of that. But we want to make sure that we take a step back before we bring any recommendations. We don't want to do it piecemeal. We want to make sure we do it with input from the community and making sure that we bring something back solid so we don't do this several times. Heather, I don't know if there are other pieces you want me to go into, but I'm pleased to take any other questions.
Yes, good questions.
Lou?
I'm sorry I didn't thoroughly read your email as it worked and before I came, so I'm still a little confused about the testing. So you're saying that there will be no testing unless someone has symptoms?
I'm saying at this time, we're not moving forward with our asymptomatic testing program at present. And the email, although it may have appeared intentionally vague, it was open-ended. We're going to continue to monitor the data regularly, and it doesn't mean that the sole indicator would be positivity rates. I'd be less than honest if I didn't talk to you about existing resources and making sure that if we go down the road to fully implement an asymptomatic testing program, I'm going to look pretty foolish if we don't have the resources to fully support that. And I'd be less than honest with you if I told you we have the resources in place. We do not. One of the deltas that was thrown to us is not having the use or the availability of COVID relief funds. In addition, insurances, that's a non-starter because they won't support the symptomatic testing according to my outreach to the Maine Association, Education Association Benefit Trust, Blue Cross Blue Shield is up there.
I'm not a doctor, but my understanding of viruses is that they're much more contagious before you even know you have them. And so I'm just a little concerned about how the people working in the building, I mean, I can hear the concern of the parents, but I am quite concerned about how the people working in the building are going to feel about this.
I'll I'm happy to engage some of the folks. I mean, I'll stand and take responsibility for all the decisions and announcements. But again, I don't want to get out of my domain. When physicians, doctors, scientists, medical experts speak, I listen. And right now, the guidance we're having is, given where we're at right now, we're on hold.
Okay, thank you.
I hope that changes.
Roger.
Mark, you mentioned the resources are concerned. Do you have an idea of what the asymptomatic testing program might cost? I know they were doing it in Bar Harbor, so I don't know if there's any information.
I want to be careful, but a number, conservative number would be $300,000
Over the course of,
to fully implement the program for this fiscal year.
for this fiscal year?
Yes, sir. That's the guidance I've been given today. And that is beyond that very generous donation of the 200 test kits. That's above and beyond that.
Just for people who are watching, how many employees are in the district? If you count teachers, ed techs, custodians, secretary, like 200 sounds like a lot of tests, but that's not even enough
Correct.
tests.
We're over 400 staff, and if we should consider paraprofessionals and other contractors, it's well over 400. And again, we've done the work to identify the groups that we feel are frontline or should rise to the top. That work's been done. That's not an issue. The groundwork's been done. It's having access to the resources.
And how, can I just ask, like that work that you did, how many people would that test in approximately each testing cycle?
Well, we said to our employees, it's a voluntary program. And to date, we've had very few people that say, I do not want to be tested. I'm acutely aware that folks want this to happen. I want it to happen. For my own safety, my family, and my colleagues and our students. But the reality is, if we go down the road, I better be able to sustain it.
Just for clarification, was the 300,000 rough estimate of that, was that for the 200 employees or was that for 400 plus years?
No, that's to fully implement an asymptomatic testing program for the year. And that, again, Susan, that's a projection. That's based upon what we have available now for that resource, but to sustain that over the course of this fiscal year.
But that included
All employees.
Okay.
Correct.
I just wanted to.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
So,
All based on present numbers.
Right.
so as far as resources available to us, have we identified other resources that we can approach in order to possibly fund this?
We're working on that. The hospital is working on a grant. We're going to work on a grant, but even if we're successful at those two entities, that's not going to be able to fully fund that 300.
Okay.
And I know if you haven't asked the question, but Nancy's here, I can't see where in our budget we would be able to, in our presently approved budgets, where we would be able to reallocate those resources. That number is too big a delta for me to manage. Nancy, am I wrong about that?
No.
Heather?
So I guess maybe I missed this, but to be clear on this, are you not going to utilize the 200 tests that have been gifted or donated to the AOS?
We will utilize them, but we're not prepared to move forward with the asymptomatic program at this time.
So how will you utilize it?
Symptomatic testing or on hold until we determine additional resources to fully implement an asymptomatic program.
I'd like to echo Brian's comment of a clear, solid metric. I've said this multiple times, but I think decisions would be, I guess, more transparent and clear for our entire community if we had clear and solid metrics for all of us to understand and to have at hand as we go through this.
Understood. With all due respect, Todd, I'm not a doctor, and that's out of my league, so I'm gonna have to defer to medical experts. But I hear you. That's, for me to go down that road is a very risky road.
So let's say if the positivity rate does, we still aren't going to have $300,000. So what happens then?
Folks, I'll just be very frank with you. The reality is, I don't have $300,000 to implement this program. There's no other way I can explain it.
But hang on, because I think probably somewhat to Jessica's question is if the positivity rate changes, we do some testing, you've got positive cases in the school, we may have to close the school. So I mean, that, that's what happens.
Right, I mean, I think that's what people are
I'm
looking for,
sorry.
some trajectory.
Yep.
Right. And I think that kind of goes to saying metric. I mean, I think it's going to be building based to a certain extent because your school might be able to handle X, whereas the high school can, handle Y, that sort of thing.
I can address that, and Todd, if I misunderstood, I apologize, but my colleague in Sanford, Matthew Nelson, superintendent of schools, they moved from yellow to red in Sanford High School. And the superintendents are asked this question every day, what's it going to take to close the school? How many cases? Well, community spread is, according to my information, is 3 or more positive cases. I was actually talking to Ian earlier tonight. What would it take? I think if we had one positive, I know if we had one positive case, we'd be hitting the pause button, referring to our local medical professionals and CDC on next steps. And I'm pretty confident that if we have more than one positive case, we'd be directed what to do in our school or our district. I hope that clarifies a little more, Todd. Sorry if I misunderstood. Apologies.
Right, that does. I mean, that's what I think when people want clear, you're not looking for like deep epidemiology, they just want
Sure.
the basic,
Yep.
like if it was 3 or 5 or whatever.
One positive case would cause me no hesitation to hit the pause button immediately. And I have these conversations with the nurses on a regular basis and the building administrator. Yeah, Roger.
Mark, I just wondered, has this been released to staff at about the same time that we got it? Did they had a chance to?
Everybody, staff, parents, and families. And again, that communication went out probably within an hour or so. And the board, the synopsis the board got was essentially the two are they're a mirror image. I mean, if you're a staff member and a parent side by each, you'd see pretty much similar message or a similar message.
So I feel like when the teacher spoke, one of the concerns or one of the things that made going back to in-person was having that asymptomatic testing, and I wonder how this is going to change that.
Well,
not really a question.
I'm aware of that, Roger. And I'm aware too that parents may base their decision, but the fact of the matter is we're green right now, and we don't have any evidence to support community spread at this time. That could change tomorrow, but that's where we're at. And there are many schools in yellow that are proceeding. And I'm not saying that's the way to go. I'm just saying at this point in time, regardless of whether that program is there or not, we would still be moving forward as recommended.
So I'm sort of hearing a couple, we're all hearing a lot tonight, but with it, it's making me think and jot down some notes for next steps. I mean, it's something that we might want to do, Mark. Some of the schools are having parent forum nights, so maybe we want to have a forum for staff and teachers with some of the doctors that you're working with, to, for them to hear what's going on, why they're saying this, that sort of thing, ask their questions, pose their questions.
It's actually happening on Monday from 3 to 4 with the hospital.
Okay.
And I'll be sharing that information with the board, but that actually transpired this morning as a result of our meeting.
And then I think, sort of to Todd's piece too, and some of the other ones we talked about, you've mentioned as far as a metric, you're right, you're not in the medical field, but you've got some contacts. So maybe we do have to kind of create that, it's not your piece that you're holding set, but it's that framework in which we can communicate to parents and to school board members and to the community. What's it going to take? Is it one case, and in one case looks like what? In 3 cases, or is it moving from green to yellow, what does that mean? So I think you probably have the ability to kind of start working on some of these metrics with the resources to build up.
Okay.
Can you wait till public comment? Okay, thank you. Other questions from school board members?
So at this point, Heather, I have no hesitation recommending that, as the board previously approved, all of our schools being prepared to receive students in person hybrid by the 28th. And again, any questions about building readiness or specific schedules should really go back to local boards and those building principals. And I'm happy to be included, happy to help and assist. I'm not trying to defer. I think the best information, the most accurate, most timely, will come from those building principals.
Okay. Questions? Carrie?
Have you heard from all of the building principals that they're ready for you to come see it? You just haven't scheduled those yet? Or are you still waiting for some of them to say they're done with their checklist?
I've heard from every building principal, Carrie, and I'm confident by the end of the week, all those visitations will be accomplished.
Great.
Yep, absolutely.
Other questions?
I think in closing, I just want to give a shout out to the nurses who have, they've always done an incredible job, but they really stepped up. And I think having regular meetings with them to include review of personal protective equipment inventory. And I would say to the public, our expectation on PPE is if it's out in the building, it's out. Our inventory is based on non-distributed secure PPE. So we'll be doing weekly inventory of that. In addition, we'll be doing regular, daily, if you will, but at a minimum, weekly monitoring of local health data too. And the nurses will be included in that process. Also, the nurses have been in direct contact with Ian and the building principals on vetting protocols to make sure that we have consistency, but we also have flexibility in our buildings. Again, some of our schools are as small as one room and as large as the high school. So they're included in that process. So, thank you.
Great. Do you have an update on some subcommittees or no?
I don't. I'm acutely aware that we need to get policy committee going, but I know that now that we've started to move forward with our local board meetings, we can have that happen. And in addition, the trustees will also be meeting within the next week or so. So local boards will start to get back into the regular rotation that we've had prior to COVID.
Mm-hmm. So we don't have any discussion items, correct? No action items? Other business?
I have no other business at this time. Again, I think a lot of the questions that we're going to continue to have from community and board will have regular updates at our local board meetings.
Okay.
There is one other thing, Heather, I know people are going to want to know soon about athletics and activities. We'll have an update on that. People are waiting to hear about competitions and those pieces. So I'll be meeting with Mr. Dow and gathering the administrators to see what potential next steps may be.
Okay.
I would just like to recommend that the administrative team, Julie, Mark, everybody, kind of take a reflection of the 3 weeks that we did remote learning and just see what the challenges were, what worked well, what didn't work well, with an eye to, if we do have to go virtual, what should things look like? What changes might need to be made so that if kids are out for a long period of time, it's a sustainable schedule, pattern, all of that. So.
And I've talked with Mark about that. The other week we had a conversation. I think that, so it goes to what you're saying. I also added to it, I think we have to throw out some of these things we've all been raised with, particularly around screen time and stuff like that, because the reality is this is what we're doing and we're probably doing it next year. And we have to provide a rigorous program. Our children lost a lot last spring and we need to ramp it up. And I think it's, I get the screen time thing, but if this is how we're learning, this is how we're learning. They're gonna have to be in front of it, And it's a different thing when you're in front of it learning as opposed to when you're in front of it just watching something mindless bounce around on the screen.
Yeah, I think we just need to be cognizant if there are going to be organizations that are providing care for kids that are trying to administer programming across multiple schools. There's got to be some kind of alignment, at least with how the day plays out, so that all the kids are having lunch and breaks at the same time.
And that was the other piece that I spoke to Mark about it, but I think that the K-8 schools need to be on the same schedule.
Yeah. So, I mean,
Thank you, Linda.
there's a lot of good that's gone on, and we've been fortunate to have some ed techs helping, and those guys are rock stars in this. But I think so. There's just stuff that can be taken away from this 3-week experience that can improve upon a virtual experience that does really end up at some point in the future.
I appreciate you clarifying and also giving a shout out to those folks that have been working hard, but that's what I was trying to allude to earlier, that we've got to take a step back and really evaluate where we're at and where we need to go. Alignment's really important, and I wasn't trying to dismiss that, but we're in a tough spot right now, and we know we need to circle back.
Did you have something to add?
I just wanted to give you support, verbal support about the screen time, and just taking that opportunity to review what that really means this time for our students, and getting them as much education from our teachers as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, anything else from board members? I'll open it back up to public comment, and Gareth, I can start with you.
Yeah, I had a comment about asymptomatic testing, and from a personal experience of going through it. We were sent home from Jackson Labs, whatever it was in March. We had an opportunity to go back in June with an asymptomatic testing program, and you hadn't appreciated the value of that asymptomatic testing program in terms of the confidence of walking back into the buildings. The challenge today, I think, for the school system is that asymptomatic testing program essentially showed that there were no positive cases, and I think is what Mark has been saying about the experts talking about it. Therefore, it reflected what was kind of being shown locally, meaning that it's likely the right decision to not start an asymptomatic testing program today. But the challenge I think that the region has is that it helped me personally get back into that building. And so now what we need to think about is how do we provide the confidence for the parents and the staff in the absence of an asymptomatic testing program, so that they feel as confident as they would have been if there had been an asymptomatic testing program. I obviously test everybody all the time. That's the ideal, but that's not necessarily going to be feasible and practical for many different reasons. But I think we all as a community need to think hard about giving that confidence, and also gearing up for an asymptomatic testing program for the school. Because if we test anybody, let's test the staff of the people, let's test the educators. And so those 2 points provide the confidence for walking back into the school, either by communicating the previous experiences, and then let's continue to gear up for an asymptomatic testing program as soon as we can, and so it's there in place when it's needed.
Thank you. Yes.
Emily Ellis, and I just wanted for the public comment piece to comment. I feel like what I have to say after listening to everybody in this room may seem a little, I don't know, like insensitive. But what I'm here to talk about tonight is that the idea. First, I just want to say that I thank you all for being here and blazing the trail of this new world we're living in with COVID-19. I have great respect and appreciation for all the work that you guys are doing, the teachers are doing, Dr. Chow, taking taking all the recommended precautions, having the difficult brainstorming conversations about how to make this happen. Accommodating all the needs during this time is a very difficult challenge, and I empathize with you and the challenge of it. I want to thank you for continuing to gather information from state and federal entities, while also listening to parents, students, and communities of the state AOS. I'm here to talk about one aspect, allowing spectators to attend sporting events. Maybe this seems a little preemptive because I know we're just moving into the mode of having sports happen, and I'm so grateful that sports is happening, and I'm grateful that we're taking that next step. And I realize that allowing spectators to attend sporting events may be a further step from even just making it happen. So I understand that piece. And I'm here to just provide some of my own personal experience. And with this, I'm the executive director of Acadia Fire Soccer Academy. On March 12th, we closed our doors for coronavirus, stopped all of our programming. We started up again in June 3rd with phase 2, which was no direct contact, 6-foot distancing. We've only done skills work, no scrimmaging, no full games, not even within our own team or group. And we did that all summer long. And we asked parents to stay in their cars or 6-foot distance on the sideline, wear masks, follow all the CDC guidelines, the governor's office. Soccer Maine has been our state entity in guiding us through this also. We've recently had soccer being moved to a moderate risk sport from high risk. And with that, allowed us to move to phase 3, which was being able to discriminate within our own entities, and then with our own clubs, and then phase 4. We're now currently playing other clubs, and we've had 2 weekends of that. But there are many, many guidelines that go with that for every club that's had to figure that out, and we've received support from Soccer Maine. And I actually have a document here that Soccer Maine has created of return to play that I'd be happy to offer up to Mr. Dell and Mr. Gov. I just want to say that we've had coming from a place of having to be the one who is helping create these guidelines for our club in communication with other clubs, seeing them be carried out. Parents want their kids to be playing. They want them, from what I'm seeing so far, that people that they want to be able to see their kids play. They also want to support the health and well-being of everybody. And you know, there are team monitors that are places that make this happen. People, we have to bring our own chairs and sit 6-foot distance apart on the sidelines. We're only allowed 100 people in. There's contact tracing and attendance and temperature checking, and all of these protocols and guidelines have been put in place that are allowing us to still manage this. And because we're outside, I feel like the risk, and from what I've experienced before, the risk is much lower for any type of spread. We haven't had any cases within our club. I've also known that travel basketball, softball, and baseball have been happening all summer long, with tournaments happening all over the state, where there are teams at Tucson St. Lowell of Ellsworth Y, where teams have gone an hour and a half, they fully leave the building, and then 2 more teams come in, and they go through their own procedures and monitor process. For basketball, softball, and baseball, they've made modifications to the game. Soccer has had modifications made to the game. And I guess I point all this out because I just want to say that it's all of this work that you guys are doing for getting kids in schools, which is awesome, and I so much appreciate it, because I want my kid to be here with other kids too. I think that we can also put some of this brainstorming and effort into helping people, parents, even if it's 1 fan per player, keeping within that 100 guidelines, checking people in, making sure they're wearing a mask, whatever it is, to be able to go support our players as they play also. And I'm willing to help in any way that I can in being part of a group that figures that out, or even just to show up and be the monitor at the game. I think it's important, and I guess that's all I have to
Thank you. Are there public comments? Yeah, Brian?
Yeah, I guess now that I've heard some of the other concerns from parents, I still have concern about the way in which you've structured this in terms of what you're calling a plan of going back without having asymptomatic testing, and that you've received advice from the folks that you've been working with, and they've given you the recommendation to not go back. I think what needs to happen is developing an actual plan, which would require that you give the parents information about what went into that decision to not recommend an asymptomatic testing program. What were the criteria that were used to come to that decision? We don't have that background information. We're taking it from you because they told you that, but we don't know what's going on that backs that up. You apparently, I guess, think that that's not such a bad idea. Maybe it isn't a bad idea to go back without the asymptomatic. I don't know why it's being said though. I'm not getting that information. I want to know what the criteria were, why it was recommended the way that it was. I want to know what numbers are going to be put on those criteria to establish when it will start, how it will be implemented, an actual plan versus just an email with generalities. I know you're not a medical doctor, but you are working with them. You can put those numbers there. That is your responsibility to do that. My brother's kids are in a similar situation, and they have a specific number for cases within the county that they're tying into. You can change it later. You don't have to have generalities in the way in which you're presenting this information to the parents. You can say it, a specific number, you can revise it later. But give us something to understand what is going on in this decision and what we can expect under different circumstances and what's going to take, what is the pause button going to look like. You said one case in the schools would cause you to hit the pause button. What pause mean exactly? Is that classroom? Is it that pod? Is it that school? Is it the whole system? There needs to be very specific information about how this is going to proceed so that we can understand what we're doing with our kids and what's happening when we send them to these institutions.
Thank you, Brian. Yes.
I just have a question. You alluded to a meeting with the hospital personnel on, I believe, next Monday between 3 and 4. And I'm questioning if that's open to the public or how that will be, the information from that meeting will be passed on.
I think we don't dialogue or any public comment. However, what I was saying earlier is I had asked for there to be a forum in which doctors, teachers, and staff can have a dialogue with doctors to understand some of this discussion. So I guess that's what's happening as opposed to general public. But I hear Brian, I hear you, and I think there's a couple of things that I've said here that is going towards what you're asking for, and we can continue to build it out with what is being, what you're saying, what you're asking.
Not to stack, but just my only plea would be that we don't use those 200 tests for symptomatic testing because insurance pays for the government if you're uninsured for symptomatic testing. So to me, that would be a complete waste of 200 tests that we have when there are payers in place to pay for symptomatic testing.
Yeah. Yes, Emily.
Emily, I'm the school nurse for Penitech. I'm disappointed that we can't do asymptomatic testing. I think it would have been great to have that program in place. Just thinking about what Sarah said about helping people feel confident. How else can we help people feel confident? I don't really think that there's another way to help people feel that confidence, but I would just like people to be aware that we do have staff members on both sides of the continuum of their concerns. One of my concerns about doing the asymptomatic testing was thinking about our staff members who say, why are we doing all this masking nonsense? There's no COVID-19 on MDI. If for some of those staff members to learn, we tested everybody, everybody's negative, that also can create a false sense of security if you're not going to continually test over and over again. So just be aware that there are people who are extremely nervous, and I'm doing everything I can to support those people. And then there are people who are saying, this is a bunch of baloney. And look, you just showed me even more clearly that I don't have to worry. I don't really need to wear this mask, and I don't really need to wash my distance and everything else. So it's a real mixed bag, which is incredibly challenging. The other thing I wanted to say as a school nurse is that we have been really grateful for the last several weeks, to meet extensively with Dr. Gauss, with Ian Braun, with our principals. We have worked really hard on really having clear consensus on protocols in buildings, down to how are kids going to use the bathroom. I mean, we've discussed details of all this stuff, working really hard to make sure that we have some clarity and that we're doing things, for the most part, the same way in different buildings. Up until then, I have to say, I was really feeling very frustrated and was really disappointed that I feel like as board members, you guys kind of forgot about us. You have 11 licensed healthcare professionals who work for this organization. 2 master's prepared nurses, 1 advanced practice nurse, probably a couple hundred years of nursing experience in between all of us. And I never heard from a board member. It's, back in August when we were trying to make these decisions, I was really impressed, but also sad to see Ellsworth School, their initial big meeting deciding, were we doing remote, were we doing hybrid? They invited their school nurses as the health experts to help them make that decision. I never heard from anybody. From March through now, every week, Emily Poland, who's the lead school nurse consultant in Augusta, she's a Department of Ed employee. She works directly with the team. She works directly with Dr. Shaw. She works directly with all the people who wrote these guidelines. She meets with all the school nurses in the state, so by Zoom. So we have access to that information directly. If there was ever a question that she couldn't answer for us, she would write it down. She would take it to Dr. Shaw. So we were getting all this information, but nobody was talking to us. And that was frustrating. I'm really glad we're on the right track now. But as we move forward and you talk about metrics or how's this going to work with the CDC or what, don't forget to ask us. We're right here. And we're also part of that plan to help people feel confident and to help them understand, no, it's really unfortunate that we can't do this right now, but every other school in Maine is going back to school without doing that kind of testing. And we're in the same boat. And I think there's good reason to feel confident about where we're at as a community.
Thank you, Emma. Yes.
Patrick Barber. So I heard tonight that one positive case would cause for a pause, and what pause is unclear. But assuming that means that there's an online curriculum, the question was posed 2 weeks ago, what that curriculum would look like, and unless I misinterpreted the response, and it's entirely possible, it would have to be reevaluated. And for me, that's concerning because you've had the entire summer to develop a plan, and it just feels like there wasn't a plan to plan for a pause. And so that's a concern for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Any other public comment?
I'm sorry, I'm going to say, well, kind of, just to clarify, just so that people know, what would happen if there's a positive case, right? Do people feel like they know what the protocol is for that? That either the family, however we learn about it, we get in touch with CDC, who reviews the case with us, who says, here's what you do, okay? It's all based on that building, it's based on where that case is, where that child is, where it comes from, it's case specific. The only stupid thing to do is just ignore what the CDC says, right? But beyond that, then it's our administrator who can say, okay, while we do this case finding, while we do the contact tracing, we're going to close for. I know I can just say what other schools have done. I think there's been 3 closings in Maine. One case they closed for 3 days while they do the contact tracing, cleaning, making sure that everybody's got the information. And that's just what other districts have done. So, but that's, it's not the CDC that's telling them they have to close for the whole 3 days. It's their administrator. The CDC is saying, here's who your close contacts are. Here's who your less close contacts are. Here's what you need to do at a minimum.
Thank you. All right. Any other public comment? All right, seeing none, future agenda items? Have anything from the audience? Hearing none. Our next meeting is Monday, October 19th. Christy?
I know this is not on the, maybe this is other business, but seeing all these, I feel like what we're missing here is a public forum for parents and people to ask questions, because some of these questions have easy answers, but that's not the protocol of the meeting. And I know some schools are having public forums, but not all schools are having parent forums or teacher forums. And maybe, you know, we need to open up an evening here where people can ask questions and actually get answers, because you know, the board meetings are not set up for people to come in, ask a question, and get an answer. And I know you keep saying, you know, and I'll say it to everybody else listening here, they can call their principals, they can email, they can call the superintendent's office, but it'd be nice if maybe we could have an online forum, you know, one of these nights. You know, I know we're all busy, but it really seems like there are some simple questions. The information is hard to find all in one place. You know, there's a staff handbook, there's a parent handbook, there's a safety protocol, there's, you know, it's all over the place. But I think people have the answers, but people feel like they don't because we haven't had here's the question, here's the answer ability. And I know I know Kate's working on frequently asked questions, so maybe that will. I feel like there's just, we haven't really have a forum for this back.
No, I understand. I agree. I mean, you know, last time it was more teachers, now it's parents and community members, but then I absolutely get it. I think that there's some that we can answer. I think there's some that have to, you know, some of these questions need to be built out, or answers need to be built out a little bit more. So is it, you know, in a week from now we can do something, or, you know, less than that, but yeah, I've been jotting down some of those notes. I think and we'll have to sort of figure it out too. Maybe we have to have a conversation, because is it an AOS meeting, or is it a little bit more local? It might be the same responses in each town, but that's a little bit one more intimate and appropriate for those particular school buildings, as opposed to just, you know, the entire community. So thank you, Kristen. Next meeting is Monday, October 19th. Our last meeting, that doesn't have a time on here, but Ingrid and I decided that AOS will go second, high school will go first, and AOS will go second. So probably it would be like depending on what time we start, 6:30 or 7 o'clock. With nothing else, I will take a motion to go into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA subsection 405(6)D for collective bargaining.
Who's the second?
Thank you, everybody, for coming from the public.